We will recall that on February 21, 2023, or the very next day after SDO Fajardo encashed a 37.5 million peso check with the Land Bank, the SDO made 7 disbursements already in 7 different locations, as evidenced by the acknowledgement receipts recorded for that date. Hindi kapani-paniwala for one person designated as the SDO to have made disbursements in Malolos, Bulacan, Danao, Cebu, San Francisco, Agusan del Sur, Makati City, Negros Occidental, Negros Oriental, and Davao City all in one day. Worse, we found other examples of DepEd acknowledgement receipts of the same date but varied widely in terms of the localities where the payments were made. Plotting these on the Philippine map, within a single day on March 15, 2023, there were 26 disbursements which were made across 24 localities from Batanes to Davao del Sur, with total confidential expenses amounting to 1,870,000 pesos. On the 9th of March 2023, the DepEd, supposedly through its SDO, was able to make 20 disbursements over 18 localities all over the Philippines, with disbursements of confidential funds amounting to more than 1,400,000 pesos. And lastly, on February 25, 2023, there were 21 disbursements across 18 localities all over the country amounting to almost 1,400,000 pesos. All 3 examples reinforce our point that no amount of imagination can make us believe that these disbursements were made to these people at these locations and at these dates. It is physically impossible. Even assuming that the DepEd has its satellite offices and field personnel all over the country, we should always go back to the joint circular as our Bible. The function of disbursing and of being accountable for the cash advances of the confidential funds is lodged with the SDO and the SDO alone. Delegating this function to any other officer or employee would run counter to the express guidelines of the joint circular and the safeguards that it entails. Unsurprisingly, the same discrepancies have been observed in the OVP acknowledgement receipts, particularly for the payouts and disbursements for the 4th quarter of 2022. For everyone's recollection, this period refers to the 11 days when the OVP was able to use up 125 million pesos worth of confidential funds. And markedly, there were at least 3 days out of those 11 days that the payouts reached 100 recipients. For instance, noon pong December 23, 2022, based on the records and the AR submitted by the OVP to the COA, SDO Gina Acosta was able to disburse more than 15 million pesos to 103 distinct individuals for various purposes. Tila po ba naka-hyperdrive na ang naging pag-disburse ni SDO Acosta para siguruhing ma-expend ang allocated confidential funds sa OVP sa mga nalalabing araw ng 2022. Notably, the following day or Christmas Eve of 2022, these disbursements continued based on the 40 acknowledgement receipts from the OVP on this date. It spent a total of 5,429,000 pesos on supposed confidential activities. Grabe talaga itong OVP non-stop kahit magpapasko na. Whoever disbursed more than 5 billion pesos truly embodied the spirit of generosity during the holidays. If it was actually true, this amount was disbursed for confidential expenses. Lastly, we found acknowledgement receipts that the OVP reported and submitted for the 4th quarter of 2022, but bear dates outside the period for which they are intended to be used as proof. Na-observe po namin how the OVP 4th quarter acknowledgement receipts were dated December 2023, when they have been supposedly paid out to and received by the recipients in 2022. Understandably, a person can instinctively write the past year in documents when welcoming a new year. But we find it very eccentric po kasi for a person writing a date in 2022 and mistakenly indicating the immediately succeeding year, 2023, wala po yata ibang reason dito except that the acknowledgement receipts were indeed executed in 2023 and not in 2022, contrary to what the OVP is trying to establish. Sa dami po nang nadiscover natin in the past hearings na sinubaybayan po ng publiko, we uncovered irregularities and deficiencies in the disbursements and reporting of the confidential funds allocated to the OVP and to the DepEd. This has been an extremely insightful exercise of our mandate as we were able to examine the sufficiency of our current legislation and how this current legislation safeguards us from potential misuse and abuse of public funds, as well as the potential malfeasance, misfeasance, and nonfeasance in the office by officers and employees of the government. Our task does not end here. It is now our duty to craft legislation that will protect the public coffers and ensure that they are not used and abused by public servants for their personal agenda. With that, Mr. Chair, I conclude my part of the hearing. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Congressman Gutierrez. Next is Congressman Zia Alonto Adjong.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Mr. Chairman and fellow members of this honorable committee, to my fellow Filipinos who are watching right now, what we have witnessed in the past 7 hearings before this Committee on Good Government and Public Accountability of the House of Representatives has left us with more questions than answers. Ang mga tanong po natin dito, hindi nakukuha ang kakulang sagot. Bagkus, nanganganak pa ng maraming tanong. But one thing, Mr. Chairman, is extremely clear to this representation. Tayo po ay na-scam sa pamamagitan ng libu-libong acknowledgement receipts na basta-basta lamang dinoktor or gawa-gawa lamang. Mr. Chair, almost 5,000 acknowledgement receipts of dubious origin, kapalit ang 612.5 million pesos na confidential funds na basta-basta lang naglaho mula sa kaban ng bayan sa ilalim ng pamumuno ng ating Vice Presidente. Mr. Chair, 612,500,000 pesos o mahigit kalahating bilyon. Mr. Chair, ito po ang pondo ng bayan na nawala o hindi ma-explain mula lamang December 2022 hanggang September 2023. 9 na buwan lamang po, Mr. Chairman. Sa ganitong halaga, halos budget na po ng isang buong ahensya para sa isang buong taon ang pinag-uusapan po dito. Pinaglaruan po tayo? Niloko ho ba tayo? O pinaglaruan po ang publiko pagdating sa kanilang pondo? Mr. Chairman, sa item 4.12 ng Joint Circular, ang requirement po sa government agencies na nagdi-disperse ng confidential funds is to submit documentary evidence of payment upon the liquidation at the end of the period for which it was allocated. These documents, Mr. Chairman, are to be submitted to the Intelligence and Confidential Fund Audit Unit of the Commission of Audit, who shall then audit these documents. In fact, upon the submission of the liquidation report to ICFAO, a certification signed by the head of agency and its Special Disbursement Officer, or SDO, stating that the expenses were incurred in connection with the agency's confidential expenses and activities with supporting documents and documentary evidence of payment is needed, Mr. Chairman. As the name suggests, ebidensya, is supposed to prove a fact that the confidential funds were utilized for confidential expenses. Ang hindi dapat basta-basta lang ibinubulsa at hindi dapat lang, Mr. Chairman, dapat lang binubulsa o napupunta lang sa kung ano-anong gastusin. Mr. Chair, from among these documents, this committee discovered that the confidential funds, which should be utilized by civilian agencies for security and surveillance activities, was just handed over to 2 members of the Vice President's security team upon the instruction of the VP herself. Sinabi po ito ng kanyang Special Disbursement Officers na si Ms. Gina Acosta at Mr. Fajarda. Those funds, Mr. Chair, were never to be seen again. And according to the SDOs, these same 2 members of our security group supposedly just provided them with the acknowledgement receipts to be submitted to COA. Ibig sabihin po nito, Mr. Chair, para po mag-comply sa requirement na nag-submit ng documentary evidence of payment, ang binigay ng OVP at DepEd ay acknowledgement receipts lamang. But in the course of investigating the OVP and DepEd submissions to the COA, these acknowledgement receipts, which were supposedly submitted to prove that it actually utilized confidential funds for the purpose stated in its fiscal and financial plan, Mr. Chair, we uncovered a number of anomalies. Sabi ko nga po, ang tanong, nanganganak ng mas maraming tanong. Mukhang ang mga supposed evidence or proof of the use of these confidential funds ay bogus or gawa-gawa lamang. Fake no, ang tawag po sa English. These discoveries led us to the conclusion that something was really amiss, Mr. Chair. May mali na ang pagkakamali na ito ay humahantong po, Mr. Chairman, sa katiwalian. Under Joint Circular 2015-001, it states that confidential funds must be utilized